The community control of schools was the first thing that I got into when I was when I first started being a teacher. I was a baby teacher in 1968, 21 years old. 21 years old. That's a long time ago. You can cut that out. But it's like it was the community rising up to demand control of schools that they felt were racist. I mean, this was 1968. Actually, the community control experiment here in New York started in '67 and funded by the Ford Foundation, which is the whole thing that we should really get into when we talk about that a little bit more. But that was the main thing that I experienced. The community wanted to be in there because the schools were racist. Brown versus Board of Ed didn't change anything really, because New York was segregated by neighborhoods. So you went to your neighborhood school. Even high school then was neighborhoods. So it was racist, and the teachers were mostly white. There were hardly any black or Latino or Latina teachers. So the people were wanting to do something, and this was Black Power time, and so it was so that was the main thing that I saw for the community, especially the communities of color, to stand up and say, hey, these schools are not working for us. They're not working for our kids, etc. And the other thing, the next thing that I would think is community control of schools would be the small schools movement. It was focused on kids, like in the early '90s, through the '90s, actually here in New York. I think that's when mostly the small schools were happening in New York City, and that came out of off of Ted Sizer's book, Horace's Compromise. So the other thing was the small schools movement here in New York, starting with, as we said, Ted Sizer and his book Horace's Compromise, about the horribleness of being a high school teacher. You couldn't really teach anything. You couldn't relate to students because you had 5 classes, 35 in a class, or maybe 34 only, because the union fought hard for, but it's like it was horrible. You couldn't relate. You couldn't really teach. So people knew, and Debbie Meyer here, they were like the godparents of the small school movement. And she founded SPES, the Central Park East secondary school, and that was made to have small class size, have small schools rather than 3,000, 4,000 in a school, and a teacher having a load of 175 students, to have smaller schools, 300 or 400, 9th through 12th, and have 20 in a class, and only teach 2 classes. You would teach them a longer period, not a 45-minute period. You teach them for an hour and a half, maybe a block, a standard chunk of time. So. And really be able to get into it. If you only had 40 students, you could not only build relationships with the students, but you could really talk about their academics. You could get into something. You could develop them. You could chart you could hold on to their work and and see it develop. You could have a folder on each. You can't have a folder on 175 kids. You just can't, unless, etc. So you understand that. So that was the second approach, and we'll talk about how our mayor and our chancellor of the early 2000s screwed that up. And then finally, this is a whole different approach. Being part of the restorative justice movement now, this is really novel, and it may really work. And this is what Teachers Unite is so like. It's visionary almost. We'll be talking about we're the visionaries, but it's like because restorative justice has the ability, has the potential to democratize a school. Because if you focus not just on, and this is important stuff, and I just wrote some stuff in a few articles last year about this. It's like a lot of people see restorative justice about we're going to help the kids learn new skills so they won't act out and be bad and they won't get suspended. Yes, we want to stop the school to prison pipeline because the black and brown kids get kicked out at these crazy rates and all of that stuff. But we're gonna show them new skills. Take a deep breath. Don't punch the kid in the head. And all of this, and learn how to mediate and listen to other. And that's great. And that's a super important factor of it. But it's like we're not just talking about restorative justice. Restorative practices are not just about helping the kids mature. It's about changing the relationships and the interactions of everyone in the school. Because if you're showing a kid when you get upset, you get pissed off, you should handle it this way, and that's great. But if the student sees two teachers who share a classroom, and they're squabbling over it, and they're not doing it in the way that they're being taught to handle their conflicts, the kids are gonna, more of that hypocrite, whatever, that's it. You get kids with low reading levels, they all know the word hypocrite, because they're always, accusing teachers about that. So stuff like that. So it's talking about changing the whole spectrum of relationships. It's like when the teachers can talk down to the custodian. That custodian didn't clean my, blah, 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 blah. Hello? No, talk to the custodian, etc. So the hierarchy has a chance to be leveled. And then, if you're doing that, well, then you include the parents. And then you enter the community. If you're showing the students how to relate better with each other, to each other, and you're working on how the adults treat each other, on all their class and race and gender differences, then you have a chance to really, make some equality in the school among all the people who are teaching and learning and working there. And then it's easy to reach out to the parents. The parents, it's hard for them to get, so-and-so, my kid cursed out the teacher, and, he should be punished, or, what happened to that kid? But you have to, it's education, and it takes time, but it can be done. So that's why I think this whole the approach of restorative practices in schools and doing circle work, like I see that you're starting to do with, I thought that was great stuff that you were talking about, doing like experience circles. What did you learn? What was your best unit you ever did in school? So you understand what good learning looks like. Good learning is good teaching, and the two-way street that's open. And if then you teach teachers how to use circles in the classroom so that they can, and help, but this is part of all of this foolishness of the test-centered stuff and all the, here's the curriculum, the Common Core. What do your kids want to learn? Well, what do students in your class have a desire for? When I was at Vanguard, which is one of the small schools in New York, in the Julia Richmond building, it was like for 3 years I did like the research paper. I was for the seniors, so I was teaching them research paper. I had like a dozen kids, for 2 months, like 3 or 4 different times. And I asked them, I said, what are the topics that you want to take a look at? What are the topics that you want to learn about? Now, some said, we want to do more about, we learned about, the Holocaust, or we learned about, slave rebellions, or we learned about whatever it was that interested them in the curriculum that we had done over the first 3 years. But now, and some said, I want to learn about the Crusades, because a kid who went to Catholic school a lot, and he wanted to know, what were these Crusades? And I wanted them to stick to American history so that I could help that. But then all of a sudden I had to learn. I had to go and read about the Crusades and stuff so I could check him. I said, but it's like working with, I'll just keep on rambling, so maybe you should ask some questions.
You kind of skipped down a little bit, and
well, you're supposed to interrupt me.
It's really important, and you've explained one of our important questions is how do restorative practices relate to community control.
Yeah.
And you've said how you've done a nice job of explaining how they relate to the democratization within a school. Can you talk at all about your vision for how they would impact the larger sense of community control that goes outside, like control of the school versus by a community versus by a centralized office?
Well,
Is there any link?
well, there would be a link when enough schools are doing this.
Okay.
So right now we're at the very beginning where finally the Department of Ed in New York City is like, okay, we're going to do this. We have a different mayor. We don't have Mike Bloomberg, who was there for 12 years and, in my opinion, screwed up the small schools movement. Now we have, Bill de Blasio, and so it's a more progressive situation. So rather than just that, we used to meet with them, and Teachers Unite is part of a bigger coalition called the Dignity in Schools campaign. And Dignity in Schools, it's advocate groups like Advocates for Children, Children's Defense Fund, and then community organizations like Drum and Make the Road, and they do student organizing. And so you have it's a parent or organization or two with Teachers Unite being the teachers group in that coalition. And we would meet with the Department of Ed under the Bloomberg administration, and they would say, oh, those are very interesting ideas. Well, we're going to be meeting with other people. You're not the only ones at the table who want to, make changes in the schools. And, these are nice ideas. And, okay, we're going to take them under consideration. But we'll see you in a few months at our next scheduled meeting, because they were mandated by the city council or some sort of law to, they have to meet with the community. So we were representing the community. And then nothing would happen, or littlest changes. So you really didn't get much going. But now, the Department of Ed has established within their discipline section, the Office of Safety and Youth Development, OSYD, they have a senior school culture and climate director, who is my supervisor now, because I'm working on restorative justice. They asked me to, come out of retirement and work part-time as a consultant for them to work on a restorative justice project that we're doing. We're trying to get 15 schools that have a high suspension rate. And some of them even have tried to do restorative practices, but it's not coordinated and it's not had an impact yet. And some have not at all. But it's like trying to get them to, give them a systematized way of going about it step by step. But now we see it's possible if you have the right administration. At least they're open. How far they'll go, you don't know. But it's important. Then you enter the whole concept of teachers unions. It's like you would think that the teachers union should be part of it. You would think that the principals union would be part of it. But it's rocking the boat. And they make good criticisms, like you can't just say, don't suspend, don't suspend through restorative justice, which is people just interpret as counseling. They don't understand how you really do it. And in places, Chicago was one. Chicago was definitely one, and I think LA is one as well. And where they, the new thing is don't suspend. Too many, there's disproportionality, racially. Too many black and brown kids, especially black men, youngsters, and now it's black girls as well, are being suspended at, like twice the rate of their, numbers in the school. So it's like, in Chicago, they tried to, they sort of mandated restorative justice. I'm not sure exactly how it all went, but it was too quick. It was told, and so you didn't get, so people don't know what to do. If you don't know what to do as an alternative, and it's just like guidance, talk to the kid, then it's like horrible. Just talk to the kid. Why did you curse out Miss So-and-so in the class and say she was this and that and the other thing? Oh, well, okay, please don't do it anymore. Or maybe you get the kid and Miss So-and-so and you're going to sit for 2 minutes. I'm sorry, miss. But the kid really learned. He can get away with stuff and just talk for a few minutes. And, so the teachers hated that. And I think they're having similar, try and move too fast, too soon with it. But it's got to be systematized. That's why what we're doing here in New York is a step in the right direction. So that the unions here, the principals union and the teachers unions, which say, this you can't go too fast. You really have to take it step by step. That's very good. You have to, before you take something away, you have to give somebody, here's the other way you're going to do this. You have to teach them a new set of skills. It's like just like you want to do with the students. You want to teach them a new set of skills. So you want to teach the staff a new set of skills.
So if you were meeting with a group of, say, teachers who were worried about they've already got a lot of what they would consider discipline problems in their classroom, and you're telling them that they have even more responsibility, and there isn't just someone they can send the kid to, that there's a whole process involved. And you're also talking to a group of parents who are skeptical about this, and why are we spending so much time on this very labor-intensive work? How would you persuade a group of skeptical people?
Well, I would, I would speak to them in circle.
No, I mean, just do it. Oh, okay.
No. The structure is part of it. I would explain to them what a circle is and why we're sitting in circle. We want to get everyone's thoughts and opinions, and that's what we're talking about here. Students act out for reasons, not because they're bad or because they're black or because they're whatever. They act out for reasons. They bring a lot of stuff, like anyone brings. The teacher can act out and bring stuff, a fight at home or whatever. So people bring stuff to work. And, you have to get further into why it happened. When you do a circle to resolve a conflict, once people know, what a circle is, so that's why I would start with a group of skeptical teachers or a group of skeptical parents. You do a circle. They get to feel it, the power of the circle. Once they get to feel the power of the circle, okay, well, maybe because they will listen to. Who listens to too many parents? How many people when you come to the school, the parent coordinator gets listened to, and a couple of outspoken people on the exec committee. That's it. Most of the parents, that's why a lot of parents don't come up for open school or this or that sort of thing. But if you do the circle with them, or you do a circle with the skeptical teachers, you get to hear them. They feel heard, then they're open to you. Then they're open to you a little bit, even if it's little, even if they're still going to be crusty and, this is a bunch of junk, it's hippie crap or whatever. But they're open because they've experienced it. That's a first place. But it has to be part of you have to have a whole plan, and that's why I'm liking and I'm happy to be part of this plan that with the DOE, with these 15 schools, because we're making a plan. The St. Matthew develop a plan, and I use some of the stuff from San Francisco because they developed a plan 5 or 6 years ago to take, I think it was 5 or 6 schools and do a remolding, step by step, using circles as a vehicle. So that was the type of thing. That's how I would approach it. But it would be those initial circles would be part of an ongoing projected plan out into the future, because this takes years to transform the culture.
Have you seen evidence in using this that people who are part of it and become to believe in the circle and in all the practices of restorative justice within a school, both parents and students and teachers, that is there evidence that, or have you witnessed that it changes their level of control over the school or agency within the school?
Definitely. The question of parents, I don't have that much direct, hard evidence that I can point to and stuff like that. And but I know, like at Baldwin, that you said you interviewed Josh where he teaches, and it's like they started doing circles for parents. Bring parents in at night and educate them as to what this new discipline policy is about by doing a circle. Mm-hmm. So they're starting to. I think most schools, it's not that that I know of, but then this is just here, and it's a small sampling that I have direct experience with. And there are some groups in Denver, in Chicago, in LA that they have a root in some schools, and perhaps they have the connections with parents. But I know when I did my own version of restorative justice when I was a dean at Eastside from 2002 to 2009, You know, starting with the students was the first thing. That's the whole point. It's like helping you all not get in trouble. I'm the dean. I don't want to be suspending you willy-nilly. So let's help each other and getting them to be part of it. And then, you know, you go around, you do organizing, you go to different teachers and you know, get them to get on board, and then you try and do it, and then they come to love it. So, and then, I mean, Eastside is a good school to begin with, but we weren't able to, because of behavior stuff, we weren't able to get as far academically as our principal and everybody, you know, wanted, because there's too much mayhem going on in some classrooms, in the hallways, in the lunchroom, all of that. But we were able to calm things down enough by having students, you know, a respect rep from every class. So every class had their respect kid, you know, and then you had on every grade, you had a teacher who was the respect, you know, adult. And you built community about people being respected. Well, that's what everyone wants. So it changed, and now Eastside, forget it. Eastside is such a great academic school. That kids from all around. It no longer has a, you know, that's a bad school. That's, you know, gangs or ghetto or, you know, whatever. So
one of the, I'm straying from the questions because you've kind of answered a lot of them. I want to go back to one of the early ones. Good. But before that, I want to ask, one of the things that we're talking about in Baltimore, especially after the uprising last spring, is what's the relationship between what needs to happen in a community and what needs to happen in a school? And so my question is what is that relationship? So you say Eastside has really changed fundamentally in its nature. How does that relate to what's going on in the community that Eastside serves?
I mean, a big thing in where Eastside is in the East Village, you know, and pulls kids from the Lower East Side and all of that. It's like, and that's gentrification is the number one social, you know, issue in that area. Exactly what people are doing at Eastside and how is that part of the curriculum? I can't be specific on that, but I know they do talk about it. They do talk about political issues and that sort of thing. But you have to really get into that. You have to unite with the community and what, you know, community people are, you know. I'm sure there's plenty of people who've been fighting for years on the gentrification issue, because the gentrification of the Lower East Side and the East Village has been going on for 20, 30 years. So you have to find that issue. If, you know, that sometimes, you know, that will depend. If you have progressive teachers in the school who want to integrate that into their curriculum, then you can. And especially with the, what we call the consortium schools, you know, the original from the small schools movement that you mentioned in the 1990s, part of what the small schools movement was about was not just having the small schools, the small size, 20 in a class, only 2 blocks of kids, and then, you know, so you have 40 students, but it was, you didn't have to give the regents, you didn't have to give the standardized test, you did not have to give this, and still, we still have the consortium. It's bigger now, maybe there's 80 or 90 schools rather than a dozen or 25. And so, if you don't have to give the standardized test and teach toward the regents exams here in New York State, you can really engage in some learning projects, and then you're able to do stuff outside of the normal, and you can do stuff like, let's find out what gentrification is about and have a whole unit with the class on it, and then you unite. I mean, and that really brings me back to the stuff about community control. I mean, in the 60s, in Ocean Hill, Brownsville, in the 3 districts that we had here that were established for community control of schools, you know, people were fighting for, and this can relate to the Freddie Gray situation, me fighting against police abuse. I mean, this was Black Panther time, you know, and there's not far from the school that I was at, you know, there was a Black Panther office, you know, and this was, so a lot of people, you know, we had Black history courses, you know, the first ones maybe, you know, in the city, you know, so we were able to unite. And that, you know, and me coming in as a white teacher, white hippie teacher, with all of this orange here, a Hebrew, if you would, you know. So I have to unite with them. You have to unite with your students because learning is a two-way thing. Circles is a main vehicle for restorative justice. Circles is, I mean, and it started when Kay will talk, and I think Nancy Riestenberg, her a colleague of hers in Minnesota. In Minnesota, they worked, I know Kay did exactly from 94 to 2003 in the Department of Justice for like the prisons. To do like circles, you know, and alternative sentencing and that sort of stuff with nonviolent people in jail for nonviolent crimes or as an alternative to going to jail. So that's where she really got into it. And, you know, the history of circles, it's like, you know, it's not like white people discovery stuff. It's like this came from indigenous cultures here, and it came from indigenous cultures in Australia and New Zealand. The Aborigines and the Maori communities and various Native Americans here and probably in Africa as well. So it's like, I mean, this is like how you solve problems. You sit down and then, you know, you resolve, you smoke the peace pipe. It's not, you know, but introduce the white man and then it's like, yeah, we smoked the peace pipe, we're still taking your land, you know. But, so it's that sort of stuff. It's building on that history of, you know, people cooperatively working things out. And you don't own the knowledge that what comes out of the circle is more than what everyone brings to it, because you're bouncing off each other and building on top of each other. And, you know, the more you do it, the more you feel comfortable with it, and the more you let people experience it, it really builds. It really builds. So that's what we're hoping to do.
So back to lessons learned from the Black and Puerto Rican community control of schools in the late 60s.
Well, I think there's two lessons that I learned. The small lesson on the micro level is what we've been talking about. It's like I came in there, you know, white hippie radical teacher. So it's like, okay, and here's, you know, 90% black, 10% Puerto Rican, Ocean Hill, Brownsville community in a school that was, I mean, the teachers went on strike, you know, over all of this because community control meant not firing, hiring ability for the community control, the board for each of the 3 districts, but hiring ability, so they hired me and other people, and they could transfer you, not fire, they transfer you. But the union made it into like they're firing them because they felt some teachers without the whole, you know, tit for tat of how it built, but they wanted to transfer a number of teachers from IS 271. It was junior high school 271. My school, IS 55, that was IS. But they wanted to transfer them, send them back to the Central Board of Ed, and then have them placed somewhere else in a white neighborhood because they felt the teachers for this and that reason were being racist and were not good for their kids. And so that made for a strike. You know, the teachers union made it into that it was firing. But it wasn't. And then, but they're anti-Semitic because most of the teachers were Jewish, and you know, so you had a whole thing. You know, is it racism? It's anti-Semitic, and so it's pitted against each other. But stepping that back to the big issue was that this experimental district in community control was funded by the Ford Foundation. So this was an attempt, my interpretation, and perhaps yours and others as well, of social engineering on the part of the ruling class. I mean, Ford Foundation, you know, represents Ford, you know, and if you get 75, you had riots in Harlem in black neighborhoods. In 65, you have Watts. In 66 was Chicago. And right before all this, you know, that next summer, when they were just starting the community control of schools, was Newark and Detroit in 67. So they saw what was coming. And that's not good for business, you know, and I'm talking GM, we're talking Ford, you know, but what's good for GM is good for what's good for, you know, they need a stable, you know, country in order to do stuff. They don't need people burning down and fighting police and all of this stuff. So to me, it was an attempt at social engineering, and that they were, you know, trying to, you know, give the blacks and the Puerto Ricans something that they want. Give them something so that they, they'll quiet down. They won't go, they won't follow the Black Panthers and not just go for community control of schools, but community policing and, everything else and health, better health care and everything that the 10-point program was calling for. And they didn't care necessarily about the Union and the blacks fighting because, well, this is interesting, and this is what I think about it, and I don't know. It may have been written about, but it's like they don't like strong unions. So if the class of working people, Jewish people in New York City, just made it, got a strong union, and after World War II, out of that horrible situation of the anti-Semitism in the United States as well as the Holocaust in Europe. Now we've got something, and then the next group underneath in the working class is fighting for, they want their peace, and they want their autonomy, and they want their community control, and stop the racism. It's like they just wanted to get it so that there wouldn't be any more riots, and and this would be stopped. But if they it wound up that it was the Union versus the Black and Puerto Rican community, and that really led to a split of that historic alliance of the Jewish people, especially in New York, but Jews throughout the United States, being such civil rights advocates and really being, standing with Black and Latino, but mostly Black in the civil rights movement. It's like that really split. That strike really split two dynamic sectors of the working class. So, but Ford can't control it, and neither can Donald Trump, and neither can Mike Bloomberg, and all of that. They can try with all of their benevolent dictator type of stuff, but so it is important that community control that was from above, and I know you mentioned that. It's like that's from above. They're giving them the money. Here's an experiment. We're going to let poor people experiment with controlling their own lives. And if it calms them down enough, they won't go and ask for everything, because they'll have their piece of the pie as opposed to sharing in the whole pie. And so it's like, okay, they're slick. They're slick and they're well-spoken and they write great papers and all of this. But it's all about dominance. It's just like when they made the treaties that we talked about before. And, they make the treaties and yes and all of this, and then screw you. So that's one of the things. It's got to be based in the schools and in the communities. And that's why, and so the other thing, that's why I think restorative justice can work, because you can transform the culture of a school if you're doing circles all the time, and if you're building that consciousness, and if everyone is listening to everyone else in the school, and the principal doesn't issue orders from his or her office, and you just change the dynamic, and then you hook up with the community and the parents, and you find out what's on their mind, and can you go further? And there are plenty of community-based organizations you can bring into your school to do after-school programs and stuff related to parents. So you can change, and that's how you do it. And you can change a lot of schools. It's going to take a long time, and there'll be all sorts of attacks on it. But if you ain't here for the movement, what can I say? It's like it's not just about you. It's not just about you. It's about us all together, and that's what it really is. It's about us all together. Mm-hmm. And so, because if you want to eliminate prejudice and stuff, and you want to make the country better, we all got to do it together. Each one doing it one step.
You tied that really nicely together. What were the lessons learned? What worked and what didn't from the alternative school movement of the 60s and 70s?
My opinion, alternative school movement, because I did that after Ocean Hill. I moved to California in the San Francisco area, San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley area, the Bay Area, and in Amherst, Massachusetts. Those were the two hubs in the early 70s when I discovered the alternative school movement. After Ocean Hill, and it went downhill, and all of this stuff, it was defeated. So, but that was like, everyone do your thing, create a school. I mean, I wasn't part of the public school system. There was a clearinghouse in San Francisco. It was like, what was it called? Like the alternative school something, clearinghouse or something like that. Just got people together. And, oh, you want to start a free high school or an alternative high school? You want to start an elementary school? Okay, but everyone who wants to start an elementary school in that corner. Everyone who wants to start a middle school in this corner. Everyone who wants to, so people would get together and they say, okay, well, what's your ideas? All right, I think we have enough. Okay, we're going to start a school. So it's like, okay, it was like let 1,000 flowers bloom or let a lot of bloom, not Bloomberg. But, it's like, he's going to come after me now. Don't say, please, Mike, please don't come after me. But it was very individualized. There was a movement, but it was sort of like hippie philosophy, everyone do their own thing, that sort of thing. So I found people that wanted to do a high school, and back then you could just incorporate. You go to Sacramento and file the papers and fill out this and that and pay a fee, a license fee, whatever it was, and there you go. You can open a school. Now you had to, a few years later, every 5 years, after you're established for a while, then they would have to have an accrediting association come in and take a look and all of this, so they could really give you the stamp of approval. But we were just able to start it and recruit kids. From at that point, we had there were enough. This is like 70, 71. There were enough free schools or alternative schools in San Francisco and Berkeley and Oakland, so we took it out to the suburbs, to Walnut Creek. And very cleverly, I called the school the Rurban High School. Rurban because it was sort of urban still, but it was in the suburbs. I didn't want to call it suburban, and it was sort of rural. I just made it, I didn't want to call it the suburban school, It was like, okay. So I just, all the kids in the towns outside of Oakland. So that was good, but you can't sustain it unless you have funding. And it's like, this is like a free school. So, the parents were, the parents were like working class and middle class, it's all white, because mostly in the suburbs, in the towns that we were in, Walnut Creek and Pleasant Hill and Concord. So they would give, a sliding scale from nothing to the 100 or whatever, a month. Back then, now $100 a month, that was big money, but their kids were having a hard time in school. So they did it, but the main takeaway, and it was good and it was fun, and the kids appreciated it because they were getting kicked out of their school for being a radical or a doper, or they were protesting this or whatever it was. But you couldn't sustain it, because as soon as we hit to that, remember the oil crisis? The oil embargo, and the oil-producing countries weren't, they're raising the prices, and there were the lines for gas, and the price went up $1 million, a gallon. So people couldn't afford it. It was like an economic recession. So then they started pulling their kids out of the school. They couldn't afford that luxury. Then we had to merge with another school. It wasn't sustainable because it didn't have any unity. There was no philosophy. Everyone had this sort of alternative school. One was more hippie-like, one was more academic, one was more it was not a movement, but it laid, in a way, the idea for the charter schools, that everyone does their own thing, but when you get capitalists, and in this neoliberal push of the last 20 years, you get capitalists thinking about, oh, we can do our own school. And then they get the funding, and that's how they're going to, so it was different than the hippie philosophy, but the hippie philosophy was not sustainable.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'm tying in the charters there. And if you had to summarize it, what would you say the lessons learned from the original small schools movement of the 80s and 90s?
the most important thing to me from that, and they're really related, to me, there's a direct connection into the restorative justice movements now. Because the small schools movement taught you that it's based on relationships. You have smaller amount of students in the school, you have smaller amount in the class, you build the relationships. You build the relationships. And so you can chart people academically, socially. You know if they're in a bad mood, you know who, you find out about people. So you know who's sort of gang affiliated, or they, they're a tough guy on the outside, they're all nice in here, but they're, you know who to ask the right questions to. So you find out and you get them to open up so you can make the school safe. Even though, when we were at Julia Richmond, Vanguard was one of like 5 or 6 schools that started. Julia Richmond was the first of these schools in New York City in '93 to be started to phase out because it was a failing school, only 38%, I think it was, graduation rate, all of this, high suspensions, etc. Plus it was on the Upper East Side, and the merchants were going nuts with all of these kids from Harlem and South Bronx and Lower East Side. It's like, all these black and brown kids, going out at lunch or something, or to and from school. So there was harassment, kids acting out and stuff like this, and they just didn't like it. So, but it was a failing school. For whatever the internal politics and, pedagogy, it was failing. And so the experiment was to do that, to change that, and break it down and do this experiment. And you had Thomas Sobel was the state commissioner at the time. He was very progressive. So he allowed this to do. He said anybody who had the, if you want to start these sort of schools, you were able to, you could start this school, and you didn't have to give the standardized test. You didn't have to give the regents. You just had to give a regent in an exam in math, whichever it was, algebra or geometry or whatever, and an English. That's it. You have to give the histories, the sciences, the languages. It was like terrific. You really had some freedom. But so the main point here. So what we did was, since it was based on relationships, Julia Richmond was one of those schools that had the metal detectors and the scanning and the cops in the school at a higher degree. Or the school safety agents, they had the scanning. We said, no, this does not make for good relationships with youngsters. We took them out. And it was, they're going to be stabbing each other, and the people are going to bring guns to school, and there are going to be fights all over because, brass knuckles. There was hardly anything ever. And we did not suspend very much because you knew the kids, once they build a relationship and you have an advisory program, you have advisory, that's part of the small schools movement, right? And it's now, I tell every school, and people are saying this all with the restorative justice, you're going to have an advisory program, a period devoted each day, hopefully, or at least 2 or 3 times a week for an hour, where you talk about emotional, social emotional stuff. You do circles. That's where you can base it in your school, so you're able to change the culture. Everyone gets to know. You built a little community in your advisory with your 15 kids. And then this one's building a little community. So you're really there building it. So you can, relationships cuts down on the violence and all the bad stuff that can happen, because people feel part of something bigger. People feel part of something bigger. So that's a main takeaway, that it's all based on relationship. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, so we would, Vanguard started in '93 and I joined in '94, and there were at that point, there were only 7 or 8 schools that were these small schools. 4 or 5 in Julia Richmond building, and a few others like East Side, in their own building. But actually not their own building, but co-located. But and every year, maybe another 6, maybe another 10, small, planned out in advance. You expand the movement. All right, Monroe High School, I think, that was a Bronx school that was, decentralized, into, phased out and then into 4 or 5 different schools. But When Bloomberg took over as mayor, and he hired Joel Klein, a corporate lawyer out of the Clinton administration, it's like they said, this is good. We're going to expand it. And immediately they went to planning for 200 new schools by 2002. You know, like, and they were going to give people who wanted to be principals, you take a course, you know, a one-year course in their principals program, and, you know, you were going to be a leader. And what were your requirements? At least 3 years in the classroom, or 5 years maybe, you know. They were babies. You had 28, 29, 30-year-olds leading with 1 year of leadership experience. So half the schools, you know, conked out, you know, were failures because they didn't know what they were doing. And it was like unfair to do it. But really what it was they were franchising this. It was like, you know, we got a great product here, you know, McDonald's. And now we're going to franchise it and get 200 more rather than slowly expanding. But it's capitalist, you know, so it's capitalist expansion, you know, to make more profit. And they're not thinking about the future, and they're certainly not thinking about the people who are the workers in their McDonald's, or the kids and the teachers who are the workers in their schoolhouses.
I've got one other question, but before, just as a follow-up to that, what structurally protects the small schools that have survived? Like, you have charters have a charter. What stops a mayor from coming in and wiping out the small schools because they're inefficient, because they're too small to have all the programming that a large school would have, say? So what structurally protects all the small schools in New York?
Mm-hmm. I think a main thing that protects them is you have, let's say, one building that had 3,000 kids, and now you have 6 schools that have 500, you know, a piece in it. You have to make them, they have to work together. You know, you have to share the auditorium, share the gymnasium, share, if you have a swimming pool, share, you know, you have to share space, share the cafeteria. You have to work collectively, and most of these schools have, you know, a principals, you know, a building council, you know, where all the principals get together once a week to discuss issues about living together, because you're co-located. So that's one thing. And you have to have, yeah, I mean, that's one thing. You see, New York is really, through the Bloomberg era, they just kept on expanding. And so you have all of these schools, they're not going back. I don't think they're going back over here to taking a school and making it one big, you know, 3,000, 4,000 kid school. There are still some of those left that have been able to, you know, keep it together academically. And so, but most of the high schools are now small schools, 3, 4, 5, 6 schools in one. So it's established here that small schools are the way to go in high school, or 6 through 12. A lot of these schools are now 6 through 12. So you have junior high and high school together, but only 600 kids in it. Mm-hmm. So you're having like 90 in a grade or something like that. I think it's pretty much here to stay in New York.
Mm-hmm. Last question, is community teacher control effective?
I think so. You know, I mean, but I think it has the chance to be effective, but you really haven't seen it for any extended period of time. You know, you could say you had it a little bit in Ocean Hill, but that, you know, only lasted a couple of years before, you know, after the union and, you know, the fight with the community and the legislature made their, you know, decision. It was decentralization, so it'd be decentralized power, but they gave more power to the union and the communities. It became, so they were, instead of just the whole Board of Ed in New York City controlling all the districts, they broke it up into 32 districts. So that's nice. Or maybe there was the districts already, but they gave more power to the districts, so you had a local school board on each. But that became political fiefdoms for the state senator or the assembly person, or that sort of stuff. So it wasn't really community control. It was local fiefdoms. But in schools where you are doing this restorative justice work, and small schools, and you're building relationships and you're using circles, You just have to extend it now to the community. So there's the possibility. I don't know so many schools that are really doing it all the way, but the possibility is really there.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I hear you.
And then you got to do it. It's like, the Gandhi quote. You know the quote. What's the quote? Be the change you want to see in the world, or whatever it is. You got to do that, and that's what you have to do as you're transforming each school.
Yeah.
The adults got a role model, role model.